He built a billion-dollar empire before he turned 35, women chased him, investors feared him, the media worshipped him, but the one woman who truly loved him. He barely noticed she existed, she wasn't loud, she wasn't dramatic, she didn't ask for much, she just showed up at work, every single day, with his schedule in her hands and his world in perfect order. She ironed out his storms before he even felt the wind, she shielded him from chaos he never knew was coming, she gave him 3 years of silent and selfless devotion, and all he gave her was a nod. Until the night one day, when she smiled at the janitor, and for the first time in his powerful, controlled life. The billionaire CEO felt something he had never felt before, jealousy. Because the janitor wasn't who he appeared to be, and the quiet woman he ignored was about to walk out of his life forever. If you love billionaire romance stories filled with jealousy, secrets, and emotional twists, please hit subscribe, like this video and drop the word pride in the comments below. If you believe pride destroys more relationships than betrayal ever could, let's see what you think by the end of this story. Ethan Vale was the youngest tech billionaire in New York. He was cold, precise, and ruthless. His company, Vale Technologies, towered above Times Square, a monument to ambition carved in glass and marble. The floors were so clean you could see your reflection, the silence was so thick you could feel it press against your chest. Every deal he touched turned to gold, every competitor he faced eventually folded, every person around him served one purpose, to make Ethan Vale's world run smoothly. And every morning, at exactly 8:15, Clara stepped into the elevator with him. Clara was his executive assistant for the past 3 years. She was brilliant, the kind of intelligent that doesn't announce itself but reveals itself slowly, in the way she anticipated problems before they existed. She could read a room the way meteorologists read weather patterns, and she solved crises before Ethan knew they were crises. She was organized, color-coded folders, synced calendars, responses sent before the other party had finished refreshing their inbox. She was loyal, the kind of loyal that doesn't ask for recognition, doesn't wave its hand in the air, just quietly, consistently, shows up. And to Ethan, she was invisible. She would say, "Good morning, Mr. Vale." His response was just a slight nod, that was all she ever received. For 3 years, Clara had managed his calendar, scheduled his board meetings, handled his correspondence, smoothed over his social obligations, and ensured that the endless machinery of Ethan Vale's life never once ground to a halt. She knew his coffee order, black, no sugar, 60 seconds in the microwave after it brewed. She knew that he skipped lunch when he was stressed. She knew he hated thunderstorms, though he would never admit it. She knew the sound of his footsteps and could tell from their pace whether he was in a good mood or a dangerous one. But Ethan Vale, he didn't know her favorite color, he didn't know she had a sister in California, he didn't know she stayed late, not because her contract required it, but because she wanted to make sure he never felt overwhelmed. Because Ethan Vale didn't see people, he saw functions, and Clara, she was efficient, nothing more, or so he thought. Then came Daniel. Nobody paid much attention when he started, the new night janitor, brought in through an agency after the building's cleaning contract changed hands. Mid-30s, broad shoulders, quiet in the way that some people are quiet not because they have nothing to say, but because they choose carefully when to speak. He had kind eyes, the kind that make you feel seen even when you're trying to disappear. Unlike everyone else in that building who walked past Clara like she was part of the furniture, Daniel talked to her like she was a person. "You look tired," he said one evening, pausing beside her desk where she sat buried in spreadsheets at 9:30 p.m. She laughed softly, the reflex laugh of someone who wasn't used to being checked on. "Work doesn't sleep," she said. He tilted his head slightly, set down his mop, and said, "Neither do broken hearts." She froze, not offended, not confused, just caught. How did he see that? She hadn't said a word about Ethan, she hadn't cried in any hallway, she hadn't broadcasted anything, but somehow, in 30 seconds of conversation, a janitor had identified something she had spent 3 years pretending wasn't there. Weeks passed. Daniel brought her tea when she worked overtime, not fancy tea, just the cheap sachets from the break room, but he remembered she liked it with 2 sugars and just a splash of milk, and he never had to ask twice. He listened when she needed to vent about impossible deadlines and last-minute schedule changes and board members who acted like time zones were a personal inconvenience. He remembered the little things, the birthday of her sister in California she mentioned once, the novel she was trying to finish reading for the past 4 months. The way she hated fluorescent lights and always kept the small lamp on her desk instead. Nobody in that entire building, not one of the 200 employees of Vail Technologies, had noticed that lamp or wondered why she used it. But Daniel noticed it, and one night, a Tuesday, late, when the building was almost fully empty, Ethan Vail walked past the lobby on his way to his car. He stopped, because there was Clara, laughing, really laughing, head tilted back, shoulders relaxed, and eyes bright, with the janitor. Something inside Ethan's chest tightened, a sensation he couldn't name, unfamiliar, and uncomfortable. But why did that bother him? The next morning, Ethan was sharp, too sharp. He arrived at the office 7 minutes early, something he hadn't done in months. His jaw was set, his questions came faster than usual, his emails were clipped. And when Clara stepped into his office with the morning briefing at 8:20, he looked up from his desk in a way he never usually did. "Why were you in the building past midnight?" Clara paused, blinked, then she said, "I was finishing the Morgan contract, the amendments needed." "You're paid to work smart, Clara, not to overwork," Ethan interrupted. She stared at him, that was new. In 3 years, he had never once commented on her hours, never asked why she stayed, he had simply accepted the completed work and moved on. Now, suddenly, he was paying attention to when she went home. Concern, or control? She didn't ask, she smiled politely, set the briefing notes on his desk, and left. But Ethan watched her go. For the first time in 3 years, he actually watched her leave the room. Later that week, it happened again, a sudden afternoon, rainstorm swept across New York without warning. Clara was heading out of the building to collect documents from a courier when the sky opened up. She ducked under the entrance canopy, searching her bag for an umbrella she hadn't brought, and then Daniel appeared. He had seen the rain coming, he had gone to retrieve the spare umbrella kept near the building service entrance. He walked it out to her without being asked, and when he handed it over, their fingers brushed, just briefly, and Clara laughed at something he said. From the third-floor window of his office, Ethan watched, his jaw clenched. He turned back to his screen. He stared at his open document. He read the same paragraph 4 times and retained nothing. Why did it feel like something was slipping through his fingers, something he didn't even know he wanted, something he had never thought to reach for, until he saw someone else reaching? Ethan Vail had not built a billion-dollar empire by ignoring things that bothered him. He was a man of information, a man of control, and of certainty. So on a Thursday afternoon, he made a call, quietly. His head of security arrived in his office within the hour. "I need a background check on one of our building service staff," Ethan said, his voice even. "Do it professionally, as though this were a routine compliance matter and not the act of a man who had spent 3 days thinking about an umbrella." The name was Daniel, the rest, they would find. What came back 48 hours later made Ethan set down his coffee very carefully. Daniel Reed, age 36, former senior partner at Meridian Capital, one of Europe's most aggressive tech investment firms. Net worth, at peak, approximately $40 million. Current status, semi-retired, private. He wasn't a janitor because he had fallen, he had walked away. 3 years ago, Daniel's 2 co-founders, men he had built the firm with, men he had trusted completely, had quietly restructured the company's equity in a way that left him holding paper worth a fraction of what it should have been. By the time the legal dust settled, he'd walked away with enough to live on for the rest of his life, but nothing he had actually built. He had disappeared from the industry, no LinkedIn updates, no speaking panels, no industry gossip. He had spent the past 2 years rebuilding, not his wealth, but his perspective, learning what he had missed during the years he spent chasing numbers. Learning to notice the things powerful men overlook, and somehow, in the quiet corners of a Times Square office tower, he had noticed Clara. Ethan sat back in his chair. For the first time, he felt something he could only describe as dangerous and threatened, not professionally, not financially, but personally. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't the most powerful man in the room, and he wasn't even the most aware. It was a Friday afternoon when the world shifted. Clara knocked on his office door, stepped inside, stood in front of his desk with her hands clasped in front of her, the posture of someone who had rehearsed this moment many times. "Mr. Vale, I'd like to submit my formal resignation." The sentence hit him like a market crash, sudden and devastating, leaving silence where there had been certainty. He looked up slowly. He thought he had misheard. "Excuse me, I've accepted another opportunity. My notice period is 4 weeks, as per my contract. I've already begun documentation for my handover." She was calm, practiced, every word measured. Ethan set down his pen. "With who?" he asked, looking shocked. "Daniel," she answered. Silence swallowed the room whole. Ethan's expression didn't break. He was too controlled for that, but something behind his eyes shifted, a flicker, a fracture. "You're leaving a billion-dollar corporation, for a janitor," he said. It wasn't quite a question, it was disbelief wearing the mask of contempt. Clara met his eyes. She didn't flinch, she didn't apologize, she didn't look away. Then she said, "You never saw me," but he did, her voice quiet, not angry, just honest. 3 words that landed harder than any market crash, any boardroom battle, any hostile acquisition Ethan Vale had ever survived. Because he couldn't argue with them, he opened his mouth, and closed it again. What could he say? That she was wrong? He knew she wasn't. What could he offer? A raise, a title, as if that was what she had ever been asking for. For the first time, Ethan truly looked at her. He saw the exhaustion behind her professionalism. He saw the loneliness she had been carrying for 3 years. He saw the quiet ache of someone who had given everything and been seen as nothing. And he realized, with devastating clarity, something he had no language for yet. He had been watching her walk beside him for 3 years, and he had never once looked at her. That night, rain poured over New York in thick, warm curtains, the kind of rain that makes the city slow down and breathe. Clara was at her desk, the last one she would ever clean out in that office. The small lamp glowed amber in the dark. She folded things carefully, the way you fold things when you're trying not to feel what you're feeling. 3 years of mornings, 3 years of late evenings, 3 years of being the person who held someone else's world together. She turned off the lamp. Below, in the lobby, Daniel waited, patient as always, no pressure, no expectation, just present. Upstairs, Ethan stood in the hallway outside her darkened office. He didn't know why he was still in the building. He told himself it was the contract he hadn't signed. He told himself it was the quarterly report he'd forgotten to review. He was lying to himself and he knew it. He heard the elevator open. Clara stepped out with her box, her coat, her umbrella, the one Daniel had given her. And something in Ethan snapped open, not the CEO, not the strategist, not the man who played every move 3 steps ahead, but this time, just a man. "Clara," she turned. He was standing in the middle of the lobby, tie loosened, no jacket, just him, stripped of every layer of armor he usually wore into the world, and for the first time she could remember, he looked uncertain. He looked human. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Do what?" He exhaled slowly. "Care about someone more than control." Clara was quiet for a long moment. Outside, Daniel had stepped into the lobby. He saw them. He didn't move. He stood still, hands in his pockets, watching, not with jealousy, not with urgency, but with the stillness of someone who already knew how this story went. Because Clara still loved Ethan, she had never stopped. She had just finally accepted that loving someone in silence, from a distance they never close, was no longer something she was willing to do. Daniel stepped forward. Ethan's eyes shifted to him, guarded, and braced, but Daniel's expression held no hostility, no rivalry, no triumphant smirk, just a quiet, knowing calm. "I never intended to take her from you," he said. Ethan's brow furrowed. "Then what was this?" Ethan asked. Daniel glanced at Clara briefly, then back at Ethan. "A mirror," he said simply. "Sometimes powerful men need to feel what it's like to lose something, before they understand its value." He turned to Clara. "I offered you partnership, not escape, and the offer stands, regardless of tonight." Then he looked once more at Ethan. "Don't waste it." And just like that, the janitor walked out into the rain, leaving the billionaire standing in his lobby, smaller than he had ever felt in his life, and more ready to grow than ever before. Ethan stepped closer. Clara didn't move back. No more silence, he said, no more ignoring, no more assuming you'll just always be there. Her voice trembled, barely, but enough. Then Clara said, "Why now?" Ethan answered without thinking, "Which was how you knew it was real, because I finally see you. Not as an assistant, not as a function, not as a convenience in the shape of a person, but as the woman who had stood beside him before the world knew his name, before the glass towers, before the magazine covers and before the billions. She had been there, and this time, he chose not to let pride win. Sometimes it takes losing someone to realize they were never beneath you, they were beside you all along. If this story moved you, if you felt something during that lobby scene, during Clara's resignation, during Daniel's quiet exit, then you already know this story isn't just fiction. It's every person who ever loved quietly and wasn't seen, it's every powerful person who confused efficiency with worth, it's every moment we chose pride when we should have chosen presence. Please drop a comment below, tell me who you were in this story. Were you Clara, were you Ethan, or were you Daniel, the one who saw everything, said nothing, and moved with grace? Also, please subscribe if you want more stories like this video if it hit somewhere real, and remember, the most dangerous thing about being powerful is believing that power is enough.